What's going on, guys? This is Mr. DeLorian. It's a brand new video, and today what we're talking about is episode 3 of Fear the Walking Dead season 5. Now, this episode, actually, I'm getting into the review and everything. Let's just get into the breakdown first. So there are two major plot points in this episode. One is actually I guess both of them are pretty big and everything. So let's hop into the first one, which is Alicia, that one I can't remember what her name is, and Morgan. So basically these they're basically going throughout the entire, I guess you could say, area, basically knocking down all the roadblocks that were created by just whoever. So basically they're going and they end up hitting because they're basically driving, trying to find the kids still and everything, the kids that were seen in episode 1, and eventually they end up hitting a roadblock which kind of stops them, and on the other end of the walkie-talkie and everything, they start hearing the kids and everything, and the kids are saying basically, we can't speak because they will hear us and everything, which obviously no one knows who they are and everything because it's very vague on who the kids are talking about. So Alicia and the girl are basically kind of just walking around trying to figure out, okay, where are the kids? Alicia's kind of flipping out because she can't doesn't know where they are, and she actually wants to keep them safe. So basically that's really their plot line throughout the entire episode, is basically just trying to find the kids. That's basically Morgan and the girl and Alicia's entire plot line throughout the episode. So the second plot line and everything, I know that one's kind of short and everything, but the second plot line, which is the most interesting, is basically June and John going into kind of this bit of western town. So basically June and John are basically trying to yet again look for the kids, trying to figure out just tons of stuff about the area, and they end up kind of driving and they start getting shot at. That's basically, actually June and John are looking for guns and everything, and they end up getting shot at from the back of their car and everything after they find a roadblock, and they end up driving and they basically end up finding this kind of westernized town and everything, which this looks cool. Crap, I keep getting into the review and everything. I'm sorry. It's just, so they end up running into this kind of westernized town, and they go and explore, and they basically try to find guns. And John actually says some pretty cool stuff where he's basically I think I actually worked in a place like this, or I worked in this place, which is cool backstory. So him and June basically walk throughout the entire westernized town and basically end up finding some guns, and they are okay, how are we gonna get out of here? Because as they're in the town or everything, a kind of, I guess you'd say, dust storm starts to happen. This very intense dust storm just randomly blows out of nowhere, and it's surprisingly not in the area of Alicia and Morgan or that other girl, weirdly enough. So they're basically, okay, we got our guns, let's just sneak out the back door and basically get out of here and just leave and everything, so we don't have to take on any of the walkers. So they go out and they're walking towards the car, and eventually they start hearing gunshots behind them start flying past them. John runs to the car, June just hides behind a building, and they're getting shot at, and eventually John gets up, shoots at the person and everything. They start running. John runs after him. John sees a walker, he shoots it, and then he turns around and there's a gun pointed right at his face, and you know who it is? It's Dwight. It's Dwight. So John is kind of staring in the eyes of Dwight and everything. It's kind of okay, who are you? Because obviously John and June have no clue who this guy is or anything. They're okay, who are you? So Dwight's kind of threatening John, basically putting a gun in his face and saying, where is she? What'd you do with her? And then eventually June just comes up behind him, knocks him on the head with a pistol, and he wakes up. He wakes up with tied up to a barn or anything, and they're trying to treat to his gun wound because John shot him, and they're all talking and everything, and basically Dwight basically says, I'm looking for my wife Sherry and everything, which obviously comes really close to John and June and everything, since John did everything he could to try to find June. He ended up finding her and all this type of stuff. So basically inside there they basically become friends or anything, and they kind of say, okay, we can relate, we'll help you find her and everything as long as you be nice to us and don't shoot us and everything. So they kind of untie Dwight and everything, and basically they start leaving throughout the roof of the house, or kind of the westernized bar. Dwight ends up making some bad choices, jumps down from the roof and everything, gets a bunch of walkers attracted to him, runs and hides into a van. So as he's kind of in there, he's kind of contemplating just killing himself, mainly because he's oh, I can't find Sherry and everything, I've done so many horrible things to her. But then John and June end up talking to him and everything, basically saying she still wants you to find you because she's leaving all these clues, because obviously Sherry's leaving all these clues or anything on pieces of paper, basically saying, oh, I'm here, come find me here, and all this other stuff. So basically they end up getting Dwight out of that kind of, I guess you could say, tough situation, and they basically kill the walkers in the town. And this is where kind of okay, so this is while I'm editing, and there's there's a completely funny scene I forgot to mention. Well, it's kind of funny and bizarre and everything, but while Dwight is being taken out of the helped out of the situation or anything, he ends up falling to the ground or anything because a walker takes him down, because obviously his arm hurts and everything, and he's weak because he lost a lot of blood from being shot by John. So he falls to the ground, and he has like a walker on top of him. So John basically says, because like Dwight got this axe earlier, John basically says, hold up the axe because there's two walkers coming like towards Dwight and everything, but John only has one bullet left. And John basically tells Dwight, hold the axe up. So like Dwight struggles, but eventually gets the axe held up in the air. John shoots the freaking one bullet. The axe splits the bullet into two freaking like pellets or whatever, and freaking hits both walkers. It's the most bizarre, funniest scene ever. Like, it was supposed to be a serious moment, but I couldn't help but laughing about it because of how bizarre and just so freaking funny and like, I guess you could say cool it was. The plot lines merged and everything between Alicia, the girl, Morgan, and all of them. So basically, you know, John, Dwight, and June clear up the town, and then eventually eventually Morgan, Alicia, and the girl and everything arrive at the old westernized town. And interestingly enough, Morgan does not know Dwight's there at all, and Morgan's basically talking to John and everything, and then Dwight comes out of the bar and is like, Morgan, and they basically talk over like just some stuff from the past, and I think Morgan kind of is like, gives a weird look to Dwight and everything, because he knows he was obviously on Negan's side, or you know, on Negan's side, but then transferred to his. So then they kind of hash out saying, and Morgan basically says, we're all trying to start over here and everything, so I forgive you, I guess. So they kind of laugh and everything, and then we get to an interesting part of the episode, probably the most or biggest cliffhanger part, is they're kind of like Alicia and all of them, like basically the entire crew that arrives at the western like place or anything, go out to kind of like scout for more, you know, of those like roadblocks and everything, because obviously they mean something. And eventually Alicia hears over the kind of walkie-talkie one of the kids' voices and says basically, we'll meet you at the truck stop. They go, and eventually they see the kids' van on the side of the road, and they're like, okay, this is bad, because it's basically like covered in like walker guts and everything. So Alicia opens the door and everything and finds one of the kids basically covered in blood, just like sitting, basically stunned, almost as if he just saw something that basically like terrorized him. So obviously she stands there, and everyone else stands there like, what happened? And what's funny is they all seem genuinely scared like of what's happening. So then the episode ends with this gigantic cliffhanger that's basically, it was the kids who were setting up the roadblocks and everything, and the girl or like the two boys and sisters are basically like, oh, maybe they'll probably fall for it and everything, the whole trap of the kids sitting in the car. And it's weird. So on to kind of the review part of this episode was probably the best episode of season 5 in my opinion, just because there were so many amazing moments, like Dwight meeting June and John, the kind of, I guess you could say, the search for the kids and everything between Alicia, the girl, and Morgan and everything, even though that didn't play too big of a part in the episode in my opinion, or at least until like the very end of the episode. Also, this episode had just amazing moments, like I said, between June, Dwight, and like, you know, John and everything, and all of them meeting. I loved like pretty much every scene like between all of them. Also, I love the gigantic like kind of a cliffhanger at the end, or kind of like reveal or plot twist at like near the end of the episode or anything, especially kind of them all finding like the kid in, like the truck and everything, how creepy that was, because they were all genuinely concerned about what the hell was going on. So this episode was probably the best. Yes, that's the end or anything. So make sure to leave your opinions down below what you guys thought of the episode if you guys did see it, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out, my amigos, and peace out.